On the day of the divorce at the Civil Affairs Bureau, Sebastian G. came with his stepsister. Unlike usual, I didn't argue with him, quietly submitting the documents and signing throughout the process. As we left, I overheard him comforting his stepsister. "Liana, don't blame yourself anymore. She won't really go through with it. I've been spoiling her too much these past few years. Maybe it's good to let this period temper her character a bit, or else life won't be easy for you and Leo in the future." His stepsister sighed softly. "Sebastian, maybe I should just move away with Leo. What if she's still not appeased in a month, and you two actually divorce? I'd end up being the villain." Sebastian let out a light scoff. "Impossible. She's just using the 1-month cooling off period to threaten me with divorce. Just wait and see. When that day comes, Sue, he definitely won't show up. Then I can rest easy." It was a windy day. As Liana got out of the car, the strong wind made her stagger, stumbling a couple of steps before colliding into the arms of a man nearby. Instinctively, Sebastian reached out and wrapped his arm around her shoulder. He smiled and lowered his head, seemingly about to say something to the person in his arms, when he suddenly spotted me emerging from around the corner. In that instant, his expression turned cold, his voice seeming to carry a chill. "Summer Sue, don't jump to conclusions again. I was just helping Liana steady herself. This is the Civil Affairs Bureau. Mind your image. Let's go in." I cut him off and walked straight inside. He seemed taken aback. After all, in the past, whenever such scenes occurred, I would inevitably confront them both with accusations and anger, as if catching them red-handed. Soon, perhaps he had drawn some conclusion, as I heard a familiar sigh behind me while heading toward the main hall. Waiting area. Sebastian G. sat across from me, with Liana Lynn beside him. Frowning slightly, he spoke to me in a calm tone. "I'm taking Leo to his private elementary school interview later, so I gave them a ride since it was on the way. It's not some ridiculous scenario where Liana is deliberately provoking you." "Liana," Lynn shot him a reproachful look at his words. "Seb, you're always so gentle with me. Why are you so harsh with Summer Sue? Keep your comments to yourself." Sebastian G. pressed his lips together and fell silent. "Summer, I got out of the car and followed you to urge you once more. We're family, and I don't hold your past misunderstandings against you. Marriage isn't easy. Please don't act impulsively." After speaking, Liana smiled and gazed at me. She had a dignified and graceful face, speaking unhurriedly and eloquently, exuding a gentle, intellectual trustworthiness. I didn't respond, my eyes drifting past her to the cue screen behind her. It was now number 9. I was number 12, with 3 more ahead. Assuming 15 minutes per number, it would be about 45 more minutes. I counted silently in my mind. "Summer Sue, stop being so childish. Liana is my sister. You should at least show some respect. Your attitude is hurtful to others." I shifted my gaze from the screen to the 2 people opposite me. Sebastian G. was glaring at me with evident displeasure. His eyes brimmed with the familiar look of reproach and weariness from this period. Beside him, Liana Lynn gave a strained smile and slightly turned her head away. She truly excelled at conveying more with silence than words in different situations. "Then comfort your sister properly," I said emotionlessly. A flicker of anger crossed Sebastian G's face as he spoke in a restrained, suppressed tone. "Here you go again, targeting Liana once more. Summer, people always pay the price for their willfulness. If taken too far, they might not even get a chance to make amends." His words carried a hint of warning towards the end. I gazed quietly at Sebastian G. He was handsome, tall, with a deep, resonant voice. His appearance truly left no room for criticism. In the past, I'd often joked during arguments, all right, for the sake of that pretty face, I'll go along with you." Or when my irregular hospital shifts made it hard to sleep, I'd have him talk to me every night, finding solace in his voice to drift off. At this moment, I raised my index finger to my lips. "Shoo, don't make loud noises in public." His voice wasn't actually that loud, but I wanted quiet. The divorce process went smoothly. I barely spoke, quietly submitting documents, signing, and fingerprinting throughout. The divorce agreement was simple. After 4 years of marriage, we had no children. His family business had nothing to do with me. The house, car, and stock funds purchased after marriage were split equally. That day, as I sat on the sofa on the first floor, handing the divorce agreement to Sebastian G., he was taking Liana Lynn and her son out to visit his father with Alzheimer's. He only glanced at it, signed quickly, and slammed the door as he left. This time, he again didn't look at anything, signed, and turned to leave just as swiftly, as carefree as if it were an unserious game. Stepping out of the Civil Affairs Bureau hall, the wind hadn't yet subsided. The car was covered in scattered fallen leaves. As I patiently cleaned them off, I heard Sebastian G's voice carried by the wind. He was comforting Liana Lynn. Liana, don't blame yourself anymore. She won't actually go through with the divorce. In fact, this might be good. Let this month temper her disposition. Otherwise, life will always be difficult for you and your son. Liana Lynn's voice was filled with sorrow and helplessness. Seb, maybe I should just move out with Leo. What if she's still angry after a month and you actually get divorced? I don't want to be the villain in this story. Sebastian let out a light scoff. Impossible. She's just using the 1 month cooling off period to threaten me with divorce. Just wait and see. When that day comes, Summer Sue definitely won't show up. A strong gust of wind roared by, swallowing the rest of his words, sweeping away all the fallen leaves from my car. Even the loose dust was blown completely clean. Good wind. I praised the sky and drove away. Returned to the villa. Mrs. May was directing the packing company's staff to organize the moving items. Madam, I didn't dare touch this wall. I think we need professionals for this. It would be such a shame if it got damaged. It was an entire photo wall, covered with memories from my 4 years of marriage with Sebastian G. I've carefully selected each of these photo frames over the years. Their placement was meticulously designed after much thought. Even the weekly cleaning and tidying, I've always done myself. Throw them all away. Without even glancing up, I headed straight upstairs. Mrs. May widened her eyes in disbelief. Madam, don't mind me saying this, but it's normal for couples to have arguments. Mr. G treats you so well. Just use moving out to scare him a bit. After all, they're siblings. And as a woman, you shouldn't be too. Leaning against the second floor railing, I looked down at the scene below. Mrs. May, once you finish packing, leave tonight. Mrs. May was stunned. What do you mean? Where could I go at this hour? It means you're fired. As for where to go, Liana Lynn is currently living with Mr. G in that large apartment. You can go to her. Why would I go to her? Mrs. May asked, bewildered. I was taken aback. Haven't you two privately acknowledged each other as godmother and goddaughter? Didn't you even bring her Jean June Métis from your trip back to Tomu Town? By all accounts, she ought to take you in. Mrs. May's face turned pale. I just felt sorry for the mother and child, so I brought her some tea. Sorry for them. So they deserve to drink Jean June Métis that cost 10,000 per pound? I said expressionlessly. I gave you 30,000 yuan to buy Jean June Métis from your hometown, since what you brought is the 200 yuan per pound variety. Remember to leave the remaining money before you go. Mrs. May instantly looked flustered and hurriedly explained loudly. Madam, that 30,000 was really all spent on tea. How could I have any money left? I thought, since you're all family, you wouldn't mind who drinks the expensive or the cheap tea. Besides, Mr. G said to treat her as the mistress. Without waiting for her to finish, I turned and entered the bedroom, closing the door behind me. Opening my social media feed, I saw that Liana Lynn had indeed posted another update. The photo was of an upscale restaurant, with 3 hands clinking glasses, 2 adult hands, and 1 child's. Not a single word was written, yet it sparked endless speculation. Someone commented below, "Does Leo have a new dad? Congratulations." Liana Lynn replied, "Don't jump to conclusions. It's because Leo passed his interview." I stared at the man's hand in the photograph. Although the sleeve covered his wrist, a scar was still visible. That was the mark left when Sebastian G took a knife for me during our first encounter. 6 years ago, When I was still a resident doctor on night shift in the emergency room, I encountered a violent family member. As the man swung a knife at me, a male arm reached out in the nick of time to shield my neck. Sebastian G. was slashed multiple times, his arm drenched in blood. After the situation calmed down, I shakily disinfected and bandaged his wounds. Leaning back in the chair, he tilted his head and watched me for a long moment before smiling. "Little doctor, if you keep trembling like this, I'm afraid I'll bleed out before you finish bandaging me." Feeling both grateful and ashamed, I stammered, "Thank you, I'm sorry." As he prepared to leave, I mustered my courage and called out loudly, "If you're worried about bleeding out, then don't even think about committing suicide." Beside the slashed wounds, there were several smaller cuts. Though also fresh, they were neat and orderly, clearly not inflicted by the angry family members. So, he had come to the hospital late at night, originally to tend to those minor injuries. He gazed at me with profound eyes, remained silent for a few seconds, then explained nonchalantly, "You've misunderstood. I never considered suicide. It's just the pressure. You know, pain can be a way to relieve stress." Such an absurd fallacy. Of course, I didn't believe it. I frowned deeply, staring at him seriously, trying to make him realize his mistake with my authority as a doctor. Looking at my expression, he inexplicably smiled again. "All right, little doctor, thank you for the reminder." After Sebastian G. and I got together, I learned that he wasn't just handsome, he was also successful in his career and quite wealthy, but I didn't care about that. So what if he's rich? I love him for who he is. His assistant once sincerely asked me, "Miss Sue, when you first started dating Mr. G, how did you overcome your nervousness?" I found it strange. He laughed often, had a gentle temper, and was a heroic figure who stood up for justice. What was there to be nervous about? The assistant looked at me as if I'd just told a fairy tale. "Sebastian G laughs often, gentle temper." Sebastian G later explained to me why his wrist was injured when we first met. After my father developed Alzheimer's, his former friends, clients, and subordinates all turned against him, with some even forging IOUs using blank papers he'd signed. The company went bankrupt with debts, and his second wife left too. I was only 19 then and had to shoulder everything. These years, I've lived under immense pressure every moment, suffocating me, forcing me to resort to extreme measures just to keep going. My heart ached with pity and urgency as I listened. "Is this what you call suppressing one pain with another? Sebastian G, you must never do this again. Otherwise, I'll ignore you forever." He held me tightly then, his bright eyes blinking as he said, "Never again, never again. With you, I seem to forget all my worries and stress. Just seeing you makes me happy, makes me smile without even realizing it. Summer Sue, you're the one heaven sent to compensate me out of pity, aren't you? If such a man appeared in your life, unyielding in the face of life's misfortunes, overcoming all obstacles to achieve success, loving you, doting on you, giving you that unique, special favor. His appearance matches the very image you dreamed of in your youth, and he's also your savior. Would you fall in love with him?" I fell in love with him almost effortlessly. After marriage, Sebastian G treated me even better. Because my work often involved irregular hours and poor sleep, he moved out of our downtown apartment and bought this quiet villa. The villa is less than 2 kilometers from the hospital, while he himself commutes over 3 hours daily to and from work. Whenever I worked night shifts, as long as he wasn't away on business, I would always find his car waiting for me right outside the hospital when I finished. Once, I was sent by the hospital to study in Beijing for 2 months, during which Sebastian G made 28 round-trip flights, sometimes just to have lunch with me. The only regret was that I never got pregnant after we got married. I knew that while he outwardly said to let things take their course, deep down he was really hoping for a child to come soon. After Sebastian G's father fell ill and forgot everything, he could still accurately call out his name when shown a photo from his childhood. If Dad could really see a younger version of me, maybe he'd remember me. Over the years, I've often felt so alone, as if I had no family at all. But thankfully, I have you now, and in the future, we'll have our child. I'll have more and more family. I grew up in a small southern town surrounded by green hills and clear waters. My parents worked in the public sector. Though not wealthy, they loved me dearly. I was always obedient, excelled in my studies, and because I was pretty, life went smoothly for me. I know that's just how life is. There's joy, there's monotony, there are surprises, and there are regrets. No one can live a perfect life. This pregnancy must be a test from heaven. So I calmly accepted this minor setback and lived with even greater care and optimism. At the hospital, I greeted patients with gentle smiles, patient and meticulous in my care. At home, I loved my husband unreservedly, cherishing the home I had built piece by piece with my own hands. I thought I could continue living this happily ever after, until 6 months ago, his stepsister, Liana Lynn, returned. That day, I finished work late and was caught in a heavy downpour. Normally, Sebastian G's car would have been waiting at the entrance. But that day, not only was his car absent, his phone was unreachable too. Worried something had happened to him, I didn't bother calling a cab and ran all the way home under my umbrella in the rain. When I opened the door, I found him sitting perfectly fine on the living room sofa. In the armchair beside him sat a beautiful stranger, smiling at me. That was the first time I saw Liana Lynn. Seeing me drenched, Sebastian G froze for a moment, then immediately stood up and came over to help me take off my coat, scolding as he did so. "Why didn't you call me to pick you up?" I glanced at his phone on the table. "I did call, but you didn't answer." His expression stiffened slightly, and he averted his gaze. I had my phone on silent during the afternoon meeting and forgot to turn it back on." Liana Lynn, sitting on the sofa, suddenly curved her lips into a faint smile. When Sebastian introduced Liana as his stepsister, I was somewhat surprised. He had briefly mentioned to me before that he once had a stepmother. His father married his stepmother when he was 15, and the stepmother's daughter was 2 years older than him. They lived together for 4 years. But after the company went bankrupt, the stepmother took her daughter and left. When he spoke of these matters, his tone was indifferent. Throughout, his stepsister wasn't even given a name. I figured since they weren't related by blood and had little emotional connection, they'd probably never see each other again in this lifetime, which explained his nonchalant attitude. When Liana left, Sebastian didn't stand up. He remained seated on the sofa with his eyes downcast, appearing cold and distant. She didn't mind either, gently hugged me, and said with a smile, "You're very beautiful. My brother is quite fortunate." After seeing Liana Lynn back, Sebastian G sincerely apologized to me. I pouted and complained a bit, asking him why his stepsister had suddenly returned. Sebastian G calmly explained that she had lost both her mother and husband in recent years, and her son had fallen ill. So she had specifically brought the child back to the country for treatment. Thinking about how she could remain so elegant and composed despite her misfortunes, I felt moved. She's truly a strong woman, but you seemed quite cold to her today. Sebastian G was silent for a moment, then snorted lightly. Back when my father had his accident, her mother immediately divorced him and left with her, taking all the family savings, which left me struggling for a long time. That I can sit and talk to her calmly today is already being polite. I didn't ask any further. Don't judge others' kindness without having endured their hardships. I thought that was his past, and he had the right to choose how to face it. That evening, Sebastian G's movements were intense, completely unlike his usual gentle care, even somewhat rough. At one point, I cried out, "Sebastian, it hurts." He suddenly stopped. In the darkness, he stared at me for a few seconds, then said gruffly, "Call me Seb." The next time I saw Liana Lynn was after I returned from a 2-week closed-door conference out of town, wanting to surprise Sebastian G. I hadn't told him about my early return. As soon as I entered, I heard a woman's laughter coming from the kitchen. I walked over and saw Liana busy cooking, with Mrs. May assisting her. In the living room, Sebastian G was sitting on the floor playing chess with a 5 or 6-year-old boy. Steaming dishes were laid out on the table. the TV providing background noise. Anyone would have marveled at this picture of a warm and happy family scene. Liana was the first to notice me. She looked surprised and said, "What are you doing back?" Sebastian turned his head, paused for a moment, then stood up and walked toward me, asking the same question. "Summer, what are you doing back?" Suppressing my discomfort, I greeted them and excused myself to the second floor, claiming I was a bit tired. Sebastian G followed me and informed me that Liana Lynn and her son would be moving in for a while. I was taken aback. Moving into our home, he remained silent for a few seconds, his expression revealing a hint of helplessness. "Leo has congenital insensitivity to pain. There's an expert at your hospital who has developed a gene therapy. Liana returned to the country specifically to try this new treatment for her child. She's been pleading with me recently, asking if they could stay at our house for a while. First, because the villa is close to the hospital, and second, because we have household help. And you're a doctor. If Leo gets injured, you'd both be able to care for him conveniently." I was puzzled. "I thought you held resentment toward your stepsister?" His expression darkened slightly. "There's no point dwelling on the past. Besides my father and me, Liana is the only other relative my father has lived with. I thought if she spends more time with Dad, it might help his condition. Anyway, they'll only be staying for a few months. Summer, I just agreed to this recently and haven't had a chance to tell you yet. I hope you don't mind." I didn't say anything more. Though it bothered me, his reasoning made perfect sense. Sebastian G had few relatives to begin with, and having such a sister was rare. Given her circumstances, it would be rather heartless of me to make a fuss. Seeing his apologetic look, I reached out and gently tapped his nose, smiling as I said, "To be honest, I was a bit upset, but it's fine now." He looked at me and smiled. During the meal, Liana Lynn expressed her gratitude to me. I graciously offered that if she needed any help with Leo's hospital visits, she could come to me. At the time, I thought it was just a small matter, and it would only last a few months anyway. But as it turned out later, I had been too naive. When did things start to change? Little by little, it began when the dozens of figurines I had carefully arranged in the glass cabinet were somehow knocked over and piled haphazardly, their spots taken by several broken-limbed Ultraman toys. It began when a few pieces of women's clothing were always left folded on the sofa, with the lace edges of underwear faintly visible. My carefully maintained white carpet was covered with children's toys, torn tissues, and scribbles from crayons. Liana Lynn was increasingly acting like the lady of the house. I was growing busier, juggling outpatient clinics and scheduling surgeries. One day, exhausted after performing several surgeries back, I suddenly craved a bowl of hot chicken soup, so I called Mrs. May in advance to ask her to prepare it for dinner. But when I returned home that evening, I found a large bowl of Christian carp soup on the table. I asked, "Where's the chicken soup?" Mrs. May replied casually, "Liana said Leo wanted fish soup. I figured since you were eating out, Mr. G, and it's just the few of us, one soup would be enough." After a moment of silence, I said, "But I'm allergic to fish." "Mrs. May, didn't you know that?" Only then did Mrs. May remember, and she looked somewhat embarrassed. Liana Lynn patted Mrs. May's shoulder with a smile. "This is my fault, not Mrs. May's. Summer, if you really must have chicken soup tonight, I'll order takeout for you right now." At that moment, Leo pointed at me and shouted loudly, "I hate her. She won't let me drink fish soup. She's a bad person. Kick her out." I told myself, Liana Lynn is Sebastian G's sister. Leo is a pitiful child. They'll be leaving soon, all for Sebastian G's sake. I'm not the type of person with diverse interests and a colorful world. Since childhood, I've been accustomed to focusing on only one thing at a time. For example, when I was young, I only focused on studying. After growing up, I focused on work. After marriage, I gained another focus. Sebastian G, during a heart-to-heart talk, my father once told me that although this lifestyle is pure, it has low risk resistance, but I don't see anything wrong with it. After all, because of my focus, I achieved good results in every important stage of life. At that time, I hadn't realized yet, people are variables. When leaving the hospital after night shifts, I saw Sebastian G's car less and less frequently. Planned dinners out were often canceled last minute due to his sudden commitments. Even during my rare holidays, we never managed to spend time alone together. Most of the reasons revolved around Liana Lynn and her son. Leo couldn't feel pain, so he'd often end up with unexplained wounds. Because of his condition, he grew up spoiled and willful, threatening to harm himself with a knife whenever things didn't go his way. Liana Lynn always put on a show of strength and endurance in front of us. Yet, she'd occasionally let slip her vulnerability, turning away with tears in her eyes or locking herself in her room for hours, only to emerge with red, swollen eyes and chat casually as if nothing was wrong. But it was precisely this facade of toughness masking inner fragility that made people pity her and take her side. Back then, I didn't understand. All I knew was a vague sense of suffocation and discomfort in my heart, as if a heavy boulder was lodged in my chest, weighing me down. I'd unconsciously linger at the hospital longer before heading home, because whenever I did return home, I felt like an unwelcome outsider, as if they were the real family. Finally, one night as Sebastian G held me while falling asleep, I tentatively suggested, "How about we rent another apartment near the hospital for Liana Lynn and Leo? We'll pay for it and hire a nanny too." With his eyes closed, he instinctively objected. "That won't do. Liana would be too exhausted taking care of Leo alone." Liana, I hadn't even realized. When had he started calling Liana Lynn by her first name so intimately? A week later, when I finally managed to get a day off, hoping to spend some alone time with Sebastian G, he casually dismissed the idea, saying it was Leo's birthday and he had promised to take them to the amusement park. Overwhelmed by a surge of emotions, I raised my voice. "I don't agree." Sebastian G looked at me in shock. Seeing his expression, I poured out all the discomfort and distress I'd been feeling these days, holding nothing back. He sat on the edge of the bed, listening in silence. I thought that, after hearing my words, he would feel remorseful, would finally understand my pain, and would apologize to me with guilt. But what I didn't expect was that he stared at me for a long time before speaking in a deep voice. "Actually, Leo is a pitiful child, and Liana is a pitiful woman. There's no need for you to be so hard on them." I stood frozen like a block of wood. For a moment, I couldn't believe the man before me was Sebastian G, my loving husband Sebastian G. I couldn't comprehend it. How could a perfectly normal person inexplicably turn into someone else right before your eyes? He sighed softly again, revealing a compromising smile. "Summer, if you really don't want to go, we won't." Liana Lynn, her son Leo, and Mrs. May, who had been happily preparing to leave, all showed disappointed expressions when they learned the plan was canceled. That day, the atmosphere in the entire house was oppressive. Everyone's faces bore subtle expressions of helplessness and restraint. Walking through that house, I felt like someone who had done something wrong, but I didn't know what I had done wrong. I couldn't figure it out. The conflict erupted in an unexpected way. After convincing myself that everything would be fine if I just persevered for 2 more months, I threw myself entirely into my hospital work and finally earned the qualification to lead a highly complex surgery. This surgery was crucial for my promotion to associate chief physician, so I adjusted every aspect of myself to peak condition. But on the morning of the surgery, after my usual glass of milk and before I could leave, I suddenly broke out in dense hives all over my body, itching uncontrollably. In that state, I couldn't even hold a scalpel steady, let alone perform surgery. After having to call in sick to the hospital at the last moment, I suppressed my discomfort and asked Liana Lynn with a grim face if she had tampered with my milk. Mrs. May valued her well, paying Job too much to be foolish enough to put anything in my milk, no matter how confused she might be. And Sebastian G was even less likely. Upon hearing this, Liana Lynn blinked calmly and, in front of Sebastian G and Mrs. May, swore solemnly word by word, "Summer Sue, if I, Liana Lynn, intentionally harmed you, May I be struck by a car the moment I step outside and never find peace in the afterlife. Tears as large as beans fell one by one, yet her expression remained resolute and unyielding. I then shifted my gaze to Leo, who was glaring at me from the side. Leo, did you touch my... Enough. Sebastian G. roared in anger. Summer Sue, what exactly do you want? Everyone is walking on eggshells every day because of you. Haven't you noticed? They're all afraid of upsetting you. Everyone is making compromises, and now you're trying to frame a child. How did you become like this? I stared at Sebastian G. in astonishment. Everyone is making compromises. For me, his eyes filled with disappointment and restraint. He said slowly, isn't that the case? Summer Sue, I don't understand why you can't tolerate them. Mother and son, what exactly do you want? At that moment, I felt a chill throughout my body, no longer even aware of my physical discomfort. After a long pause, I raised my hand, pointing at Liana Lynn, and said calmly, you ask what I want, then I'll tell you. I want them to move out. Sebastian G's gaze turned cold, his voice icy. Summer Sue, then let me tell you, that's impossible. I promised they could stay for 6 months, not a day less. Fine, then we'll get a divorce. As those words left her mouth, the room fell into sudden silence. Sebastian G. gritted his teeth. Summer Sue, what are you saying? I looked up, meeting his eyes. I'm saying, either they move out, or we divorce. I've made up my mind. I'm busy every day, with no time or energy to compete with Liana Lynn for superiority. Nor am I a detective, unable to find evidence to prove what's right or wrong. All I know is, this is my home. I have the right to decide who lives here and who doesn't. Sebastian G. fell silent, staring directly back at me. For a moment, no one spoke. A hint of tension appeared on Liana Lynn's face. After a long pause, Sebastian G. lowered his head, his voice weary. I'll find them a new place to live outside. He had conceded, but I felt no joy whatsoever. Because I knew this was blackmail using his love for me, I felt terrible. I couldn't understand how such a simple matter had come to this point. Liana Lynn showed an expression of utter disappointment. Leo burst into loud sobs. I'm not leaving. This is my home. This is my mom and uncle's home. I won't go. Soon, Sebastian G. found a suitable apartment. Liana Lynn and her son planned to move out the next day. Due to my allergies, I rested at home and finally had time to calmly reflect on everything that had happened. I didn't know if I had done the right thing. Other wives might file for divorce due to their husband's affairs, domestic violence, or falling for someone else. Sebastian had done none of these things. It was all over such a trivial matter, simply because he let his stepsister stay in her home. I couldn't help but question myself. Had I overreacted? Was it really impossible for me to endure just a few months? I couldn't quite explain why, but a woman's intuition was convincing me. It had to be this way, even if it temporarily hurt our marital bond. Liana and her son had to move out as soon as possible. Sebastian and I still had a long life ahead of us, and we would have children. As long as there were no disruptions, our relationship could gradually heal. At the thought of children, my train of thought paused. I suddenly realized I hadn't had my period in 2 months. My heart began to race. There were no pregnancy test strips at home, and unable to contain my excitement, I immediately got out of bed and headed to the pharmacy in our complex. Just then, Liana pushed the door open and walked in, with a faint smile on her face. She said she had come specifically to thank me before leaving. My gaze fell on the pink hair clip she was wearing. It was an old-fashioned, girlish clip that looked out of place on her. What stunned me was that I had seen this hair clip before. Sebastian G. was a sentimental man, with a treasured box filled with various keepsakes from his youth, including this pink hair clip. I once jokingly asked if it was a memento from his first love, but he calmly replied that it had belonged to his mother. Liana Lynn casually mentioned a few words before leaving. Her visit was so brief it seemed solely intended for me to see that hair clip. After buying a test kit from the pharmacy, I passed by the second floor study and suddenly overheard a woman's sobbing voice inside. Normally, I would have walked away immediately, but the image of the hair clip flashed in my mind, making me pause involuntarily. The door was slightly ajar, and though the voice was soft, it was clear. I know we agreed to forget the past, to act like normal siblings, and never hurt Summer Sue. But Seb, I still feel so wronged. I haven't done anything wrong. I've been enduring and giving in all along, just because I'm your stepsister and she's your wife. Must I bear such unfair treatment? Seb, your sister feels life is so bitter, sometimes even wondering if there's any point in living. Sebastian G's voice sounded somewhat subdued. I didn't handle this matter well, and I've wronged you. Since I'm leaving anyway, I don't want to hold back anymore. Seb, I just want to ask you one question. That night many years ago, have you ever regretted it? Sebastian G remained silent. You haven't forgotten, have you? Otherwise, you wouldn't still keep the hair clip I left on your bed that day. After a brief silence in the room, a soft voice spoke. I haven't forgotten, never forgotten. My mind suddenly went blank with a roaring sensation. Everything before my eyes seemed to twist and spin. The study door, the railing, the hallway, and in the hallway, Leo's face suddenly appeared. Get out of my house, he muttered under his breath, rushed over and grabbed me, and the next moment, we were tumbling down the stairs. Thump, thump, thump. When I staggered to my feet, I saw Leo lying on the ground, his face covered in blood, motionless with his eyes closed. The study door on the second floor swung open, and Sebastian G and Liana Lynn rushed down in panic. Liana, holding Leo, shouted at me with grief and anger. Summer, we're all leaving. You've achieved your goal. Why did you hurt Leo? He's just a poor child. I didn't. He pushed me, I said loudly, but the sound that came out was barely audible. As they took Leo to the hospital, I felt a warm surge between my legs. My body gave way, and I collapsed to the floor, bright red blood slowly flowing out. My eyes widened, my whole body trembled, and my words came out in broken tones. Sebastian, save our child. I shouted with all my might, but it came out as faint as a mosquito's hum. Fortunately, Sebastian heard me and stopped in his tracks. Trembling, I reached my hand out toward him, but he didn't move, his gaze cold as he stared at me. Summer, you've truly disappointed me this time. With that, he rushed out without looking back, holding Leo. From that day on, Sebastian G and I became strangers living under the same roof. Later on, I presented the divorce agreement. He signed it without hesitation and moved Liana Lynn and her son into his former luxury apartment that very day. After leaving the Civil Affairs Bureau, Sebastian G was in a foul mood. He had initially thought Summer Sue wouldn't show up today. When Liana cautiously asked if she could ride with him to Leo's elementary school interview, he agreed without a second thought. So, when he saw Summer at the Civil Affairs Bureau entrance, his expression darkened instantly. His mind flooded with only one thought. She actually came. She's so willful. In that moment, he decided to teach her a lesson by letting her go through with this reckless divorce. Throughout the divorce process, Summer's expression remained detached, barely making eye contact with him. He felt utterly disappointed, mixed with a simmering anger. As they stepped out, Liana Lynn lamented with guilt, saying if only she hadn't suggested moving in, they wouldn't have reached the point of divorce. He absent-mindedly comforted her, insisting that Summer Sue wouldn't actually divorce him. It was just her way of threatening him. Spoiled as she was, Liana asked, "Really?" He paused briefly, then scoffed coldly. Of course. Summer Sue would never truly go through with the divorce. Her ultimate goal was simply to make Liana and her son move out. Yet she had so easily uttered the word divorce, using it as leverage against him. That was what disappointed him the most. That day in the hospital, Liana tearfully and indignantly asked, why would Summer be so cruel to Leo, deliberately pushing him down the stairs? He retorted in surprise. How could Summer have intentionally pushed Leo? At most, she shoved him away in anger, and they both accidentally fell down the stairs. After Leo recovered from his injuries, he became very attached to him, as if afraid of being sent away again. Liana Lynn suggested moving in with him at his original spacious apartment. He instinctively refused, but Liana Lynn's eyes reddened. After a moment of silence, she said softly. Seb, don't worry. I won't be like I used to be. Her voice was soft and timid as she spoke, making him vaguely recall how she once was. Pursing his lips, he didn't refuse again. The first week of the cooling off period, Sebastian G threw himself completely into work, deliberately avoiding any thoughts of Summer Sue. Having decided to use this chance to teach her a lesson, he couldn't afford any softness. He often worked late, repeatedly checking his phone. But since that day, Summer Sue hadn't called, sent a message, or even posted a single update on social media. Leo kept chattering about wanting to go to the amusement park, complaining that his aunt was so annoying and that his mom said his aunt wouldn't allow him to go. He frowned, about to scold Leo, but then his heart softened, and he agreed. That day, he intentionally took many photos with Liana Lynn and her son, looking happy and intimate. He knew Liana Lynn would definitely post on her social media, hoping that Summer Sue might see it. With her petty nature, she might not be able to resist coming to confront him immediately. But there was no reaction on the first day, nor on the second day. On the evening of the third day, he returned from work exhausted, entered the bathroom, and unexpectedly found Liana Lynn showering naked inside. Startled, Liana fell to the ground, letting out a pained moan. Liana said she had sprained her ankle. He tossed a towel in, wrapped her up, and carried her out. She apologized in his arms, explaining that the shower head in the other bathroom was broken and, thinking he wasn't home, she had come to use his. He remained silent, carried her back to her room, and laid her on the bed. As he turned to leave, Liana's melancholic voice came from behind. Actually, I've never forgotten either. His body froze. She continued, that was your first time. And mine too. Seb, if only those things hadn't happened between our parents back then. Sebastian G froze in place. For many years, he had deliberately avoided recalling that chaotic and forbidden night from his youth. Cicadas chirred, the air thick with humidity. He had just finished reading a banned book borrowed from a classmate, his emotions surging, blood coursing hotly through his veins. She appeared in his room wearing a thin nightgown, saying she couldn't reach the medicine on her lower back, asking if he could help her. That night, the room was filled with the strong scent of medicated oil, mingled with another peculiar odor that would haunt him for over a decade to come. After all, it was evidence of his bygone youth. So when years later, Liana Lynn reappeared in his life, in a posture of seeking help, how could he possibly refuse? It was all in the past, and she was his stepsister after all. Helping her was only right. He told himself this, but he hadn't anticipated that Summer Sue would react so strongly to the matter. At the thought of Summer Sue, he sobered up a little instantly. He turned to say something, only to see Liana Lynn drop her towel, standing there completely naked with tears in her eyes as she looked at him. Seb, you've been so lonely all these years, haven't you? Let your sister comfort you. Okay. He froze for 2 seconds, both shocked and furious, shouting loudly, Liana Lynn, if you keep this up, move out immediately. He turned and rushed out the door. His heart surged with an indescribable restlessness, as if something that should have remained unspoken had been abruptly torn open, leaving him feeling angry, panicked, and mixed with a hint of guilt. He suddenly longed to see Summer Sue, longed for her deeply. He went to the villa, where lights were on, which calmed him somewhat instantly. Summer Sue always had this magical ability to soothe and steady his chaotic, helpless heart, just like the first time he met her. She was bowing her head, bandaging his wound, tears falling one by one onto his arm and trickling down. It gave him a peculiar feeling. He couldn't help but start counting. 7 drops, 8 drops, 50 drops. He was stunned. He couldn't understand how such a petite girl could produce so many continuous tears. He knew she was scared, and for the first time in years, without joking with anyone, he unexpectedly cracked a joke. If his colleagues saw this, they'd probably be shocked beyond belief. But he didn't feel unnatural at all. Instead, he felt extremely relaxed, as if this was how he was always meant to be. As she left, the girl, trembling like a reed in the wind, tried hard to put on a serious face and earnestly told him he shouldn't commit suicide. He was slightly surprised, not expecting this young girl to be so thoughtful. She had misunderstood. He had never considered suicide. It was indeed just an extreme way to cope with pressure. She didn't believe him, her dark eyes fixed intently on him. He suddenly laughed. A genuine sense of joy welled up inside him, and he said to her, "Thanks for the reminder, little doctor." Incorrect password. He froze at the door. Sue had changed the password, which he found hard to accept. Surely it wasn't to keep him out. He took out his phone to call her, but she hung up after 2 rings. He called again, and she hung up again. "What is it?" Her WeChat message popped up on his phone, just 3 simple words. He let out a long sigh and gave the excuse he'd prepared. "I came to get my pajamas. You know, I can't sleep without that set." Summer didn't reply for a while. Just as he thought the door was about to open, she messaged again, "In the box by the door. Look for it yourself." He was bewildered. In a box by the door? Glancing around, he saw a pile of cardboard boxes by the entrance, clearly meant to be thrown out, but not yet done. Rifling through them casually, he found some of his clothes haphazardly stuffed in one of the boxes. This made him feel somewhat angry. If Summer was discarding them like this, what would he use when he came back? Suddenly, he noticed dozens of photo frames of various sizes placed against the wall. He squinted his eyes and realized it was actually a photo wall. Those were things Sue had once treasured like precious gems. Now, they were haphazardly piled in the corner, scattered and disorganized. He stared at the pile in disbelief. A wave of intense, complex emotions surged within him: anger, resentment, and even a hint of self-pity, feeling that everything he had tried so hard to protect was being ruthlessly trampled and humiliated. Suddenly, he turned around and strode away. He returned to the luxury apartment and found Liana Lynn sitting quietly on the sofa, lost in thought. Her eyes were red as she looked at him, timid, sorrowful, and helpless. With a stern expression, he walked over step by step, paused for 2 seconds, and slowly reached out his hand to her. Her long eyelashes fluttered slightly as she gently rested her face in his palm. He didn't do anything with her. He just curled up in her arms, and they slept holding each other through the night. He had been feeling wronged all this time too. He needed comfort as well. For the next while, he simply took a vacation, taking Liana Lynn and her son everywhere to enjoy the finest restaurants and buy expensive jewelry and handbags. He always accompanied Leo to every doctor's appointment. Liana continued to frequently take photos and post them on social media. During this time, he encountered Sue twice. The first time was in a hospital corridor. He was holding Leo's hand with his left, with Liana standing on his right. When Liana stumbled in her high heels, he instinctively wrapped an arm around her shoulder and, looking up, saw Sue walking towards them alone, hands in her pockets. He pressed his lips together and stopped in his tracks, but she merely glanced at them indifferently and passed by without a change in expression. The second time was at a Western restaurant. Leo had said he wanted steak, so he brought them there to eat. As they were about to leave, he saw Sue entering with a man and sitting down by the window. He instinctively walked over and sneered, saying, "Summer, aren't you going to introduce us?" Sue frowned slightly, but said nothing. Gazing at her familiar profile, he felt a momentary daze, even an impulse to tell her, "Summer, don't be angry anymore. Let's go home, okay?" At that moment, Liana Lynn's gentle voice sounded from behind. "Leo is getting sleepy. Let's hurry home." She seemed to have just noticed Summer and showed surprise. "Summer, what a coincidence. And who is this?" Her eyes swept over the man appraisingly. The man tilted his head slightly, glanced at Sebastian G., and asked calmly, "So you're Summer soon, to BX, husband?" Sebastian retorted coldly, "Not yet divorced, so not quite. And who might you be?" The man smiled and said leisurely, "I'm Summer's suitor, wishing you a smooth divorce." Sebastian laughed in exasperation, glaring intently at Summer. "In such a hurry?" Summer looked up, her expression calm as she met his gaze. "Yes, quite urgent indeed." The man lowered his head with a muffled chuckle. Sebastian G's face darkened as he turned and left. The figures of the three disappeared beyond the door. Summer Sue looked at the man opposite her with a headache. Senior, why would you make such a joke too? The man curled his lips. Don't all web series have these slapping moments? Turns out it really feels quite satisfying. Summer was helpless. This is your farewell dinner. When our classmates arrive later, please don't make such jokes anymore. You'll scare people to death. Sebastian G got drunk. He felt an emptiness in his heart that he could only fill with glass after glass of alcohol. These past few days, he had conspicuously accompanied Liana Lynn and her son, arguably hoping Summer would see it through Liana's social media and feel threatened, prompting her to apologize proactively, but unexpectedly. While he was doing all this, she was actually on a solo date with another man. What pained him most was that, at one point, he saw her smiling at that man. How long had it been since Summer last smiled at him? It seemed that not long after Liana moved in, she had rarely smiled so brightly anymore. He felt extremely aggrieved and miserable. He didn't know what he had done wrong, how his relationship with Summer Sue had come to this point. When he woke up, he found himself lying in his bed at home. From the bathroom came the faint sound of dripping water. Beside him was that familiar pink hair clip. Shaking his head, vague images surfaced in his mind, seeming to overlap with scenes from many years ago. He realized something, feeling as if struck by lightning. He put on his clothes with a chill running through his body and fled in panic. Impossible. He loved Summer Sue. This was something he was absolutely certain of. Therefore, he absolutely could not have done anything irrational, not even if he was drunk. He wandered aimlessly through the streets. Unconsciously, he ended up at the hospital. He saw Summer Sue. She was with a group of doctors receiving a patient from an ambulance. The patient was covered in blood, screaming and struggling wildly. At one point, the patient broke free from restraints, grabbed a piece of equipment from the ambulance, and hurled it at someone. Summer Sue was looking down. Sebastian G rushed over. He woke up in the hospital room 2 days later. Opening his eyes, he saw Summer Sue sitting by his bedside, sunlight illuminating her face, bright and radiant, just like she used to be, overwhelmed with emotions. He choked up and said, "Summer, I'm just glad you're okay." Summer Sue smiled gently at him. "Yes, I'm fine. How are you feeling now?" Seeing her smile again brought tears to his eyes. These past days had been a blur, like a lost soul wandering, but now, that familiar sense of peace finally returned. He forced a cheerful smile. "Don't worry about me. I'm fine." Strong as ever. Perhaps due to the medication, he fell asleep again, and in his drowsy state, he seemed to hear nurses talking. The sky is really something. That machine couldn't have hit anyone, yet he deliberately stepped forward to take the blow. He called out for Director Sue at that moment to save her, but Director Sue was standing the farthest away. It couldn't have hit her no matter what. Now look, what could have been an incident, free situation has turned into an accident. He closed his eyes, shutting out all sounds. Only one thought filled his mind. He had saved Summer Sue again. No matter what had happened, they could start over. On the day of his discharge, he felt refreshed and clear-headed. Summer Sue stayed by his side the whole time, handling procedures, picking up medication, and driving him home, speaking softly and caring for him attentively throughout. In the car, he spoke with a tone of having moved past old grievances. "Summer Sue, we've both been at fault before. I apologize to you, and from now on, let's cherish each other as we move forward. This incident made me realize how precious life is. I've decided I'm taking a long break to focus wholeheartedly on having a child." The sound of brakes echoed as the car came to a halt. He realized they had arrived at the entrance of his apartment complex. "Summer Sue, are you still not letting me return to the villa?" he asked with a helpless smile. Summer Sue lowered her gaze, then suddenly took a piece of paper from her bag and handed it over. He raised an eyebrow and looked down at it. It was a pregnancy diagnosis report. Name, Summer Sue. The date was 2 months ago. His eyes lit up instantly, his voice trembling with excitement. "Summer Sue, is it true? I'm going to be a father?" Summer Sue stared straight ahead and spoke calmly. "Yes, once upon a time." He was confused. Once upon a time? This child was unfortunate, only existing in this world for a short while. It was lost the day I fell down the stairs. Originally, it could have survived if its father had taken it to the hospital in time, but that day, its father chose to save another child. Sebastian G. began to tremble uncontrollably. Before I fell down the stairs that day, I overheard your conversation with Liana Lynn. You told her you had never forgotten. Summer Sue's voice was faint, as if coming from a distant place, yet each word pierced through the skin, burrowing deep into the bone. Relentless and unyielding, Liana Lynn was truly a resilient woman, joyfully documenting her life even through misfortune. What could be shared publicly went on her social media, while the more private moments were sent to me in private messages. Sebastian G. abruptly turned his head, his face pale as he stared at Summer Sue, his teeth beginning to chatter uncontrollably, like the many photos of you sleeping in her arms on numerous nights, or the video from the entire night before you got injured. Sebastian's back slumped, and a painful groan escaped from the depths of his throat. Stop, please, stop. Summer Sue turned to look at him, calm and composed. Sebastian G. Tomorrow marks the 30th day of the cooling off period. I've been busy ensuring you're discharged healthy today, so we don't delay what's important. So, please don't be absent tomorrow, okay? That day, when Sebastian returned to the penthouse like a man who'd lost his soul, Liana rushed over and hugged him. Seb, whatever Summer Sue told you is false. All lies. She's just trying to get back at me and Leo. I'm your sister. After Dad, I'm your closest family in this world. He let her hold him, speaking expressionlessly. Take Leo and leave. Now, otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to control myself. But I can't cause trouble. I promised Summer Sue I'd help her with important matters tomorrow. She cares deeply about this, and I can't let her down. Liana Lynn looked at him, seeming to realize something, her face showing terror. Soon, she disappeared with Leo. For a long time after his divorce, Sebastian G. didn't dare to seek out Summer Sue. He felt too ashamed to face her. He knew she certainly wouldn't want to see him. After all, he couldn't even forgive himself. Finally, one night, he couldn't resist going to the villa, only to find it had new owners. Summer Sue had sold the place where they once lived together. He bought the villa back at a high price, and from then on, drowned his sorrows there. Lost and empty, what ifs? He repeatedly imagined the child who had come and gone so briefly. He imagined that if the child had been born, whether boy or girl, its eyes would surely have been large, bright, and pure, just like the first time he saw Summer Sue. 3 months after the divorce, Liana Lynn reappeared with Leo. He was lying on what used to be Summer Sue's bed. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw the mother and son pair. Liana was in tears, her voice filled with sorrow. Seb, Leo's new treatment is showing results, but it requires a large sum of money. Can you help me out, sis? He got up and, expressionless, roughly pulled Liana out, his actions forceful and heedless. Liana stumbled along, looking utterly disheveled. Leo rushed over, trying to bite him. He shoved him away hard, causing Leo to fall to the ground and lose consciousness. Liana's eyes widened as she let out a scream. How dare you hurt my son? I'll kill you. How could you do this to a child? Sebastian G. had only one thought, to drive this woman away, out of this home. Unable to break free, Liana looked at her still, unconscious son and screamed frantically, You deserve it. Your whole family deserves it. Your father actually said he wouldn't leave us a single penny, so I switched his stroke medication. Karma. He really became demented, turned into an old fool. Sebastian G. stared at Liana Lynn in disbelief, his hands involuntarily closing around her neck. The woman in his grasp made choking sounds, gasping for her last breaths. The commotion alerted the neighborhood security, who began pounding on the door from outside. He suddenly regained his senses, released his grip, and stumbled back before collapsing to the floor. Nearby, little Leo slowly stirred, crawling toward them. Just as the door burst open, Leo's body tilted and tumbled down the stairs with a series of thuds. Amid the crowd's shocked cries, Leo, his face covered in blood, pointed a trembling finger at him. He pushed me. With those words, he lost consciousness. Sebastian G was sentenced to 1 year in prison for intentional assault. Liana, Lynn, visited him at the detention center, bringing the letter of understanding. The prolonged oxygen deprivation from being strangled had caused her to suffer a stroke, leaving her face contorted and her speech slurred. She demanded $10 million in exchange for the letter of understanding. Sebastian G didn't give her a single cent. He merely said calmly, "It's fine. This is what we deserve." Liana Lynn broke down and cried out, "Then what about Leo? What will become of us in the future?" He closed his eyes, refusing to look at her again. At the same time, on the other side of the world, Summer Sue officially began her 2-year work as a doctor aiding Africa in Equatorial Guinea. One day, she received a video call. In the video, Sebastian G seemed like a different person, with a buzz cut, gaunt, his cheekbones sharply defined. He sincerely apologized to her, recounting the past in detail. Sebastian G pressed his lips together and fell silent. "I can hardly imagine what you went through when you were pushed down the stairs. In this world, it feels like I have no family left. Summer, I don't know how to face the long, painful future ahead." Summer quietly watched him on the screen, her voice composed. "I've been through the same thing. Even with the ability to move on, easing the pain is still a long process. Later, I chose to dilute it with a broader world. Hope that helps you." Hung up the phone. Summer Sue turned and saw her senior. He scratched his head, looking somewhat embarrassed. "Sorry, you were speaking Chinese here so openly. I couldn't help but overhear." "But," he frowned again, his expression serious, "you're really bold. How dare you apply to come to a place like this less than 2 months after miscarriage?" Luckily, nothing happened. Summer Sue shrugged. "I never had a miscarriage." Senior raised an eyebrow. She explained helplessly, "It was my period that came. I misunderstood. Later, I just let it stand to facilitate the divorce." Senior tilted his head. "What kind of act was that?" Summer Sue sighed. "After being mistreated for so long, I had to pay it back once. Isn't that how web series usually go?" Senior paused for a second, then burst into laughter. "I told you the web series was good, but you looked down on it. Now, you're proven wrong." Summer Sue smiled. Her gaze turned to the setting sun over the African landscape. Majestic and serene. When one door closes, another opens. The world is so vast, capable of erasing all pain. What could possibly be insurmountable? So she thought.